What's up, you guys? Welcome to today's video. As you can tell by the title, I'm going to be sharing with you how women are treated if they're pregnant in prison. More specifically than that, I'm going to be sharing with you my own personal experience being pregnant in jail and then eventually prison. I have also shared on my channel what it's like to give birth in prison, and that video is always linked down below. If you have not seen that video, I would highly recommend that you watch that video before this video. It's just going to give you a backstory on me and what it was like to physically give birth to a child in prison. For those new to my channel, I am a recovering addict with 8 years of sobriety, and my daughter was my why. She was the why in why I got sober. She gave me a purpose and a passion to completely change my life. As happy as that story is, it was also extremely traumatic for me, and it took me years to recover from giving birth in prison and then losing my daughter 2 days later. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. When I found out I was pregnant in county jail, I was completely shocked. I didn't think that the nurse was accurate. For some reason, I thought that the nurse had mixed up these pregnancy tests. Like, not me. I can't be pregnant. I was on birth control. But I was a meth addict, not doing the birth control correctly, in that I wouldn't take it the same time every single day. Now, for my girls out there, you have to take your birth control pill every single day. You can't miss a day, or you shouldn't miss a day. So there would be days that I missed it. I just wasn't taking it properly, and I got pregnant. So I remember sitting in that nurse's office, and it was just so... It was almost like I was experiencing an out-of-body experience. Like, there's no way this nurse is talking to me or looking at me the way that she looked at me, which leads me to the first way that women are treated if they're pregnant in jail and then eventually prison. That nurse looked at me like I was lower than a person. She looked at me with such disgust and such disdain that she could not believe that I was sitting there in jail with the charges that I had, pregnant. To be fair to the nurse, maybe I would have looked at that person the same if I had seen a 90-pound girl that just got arrested for possession of meth and delivery of meth, and I have track marks from the top of my arm all the way down. Maybe I would have looked at her the same. I was sick, and I was arrested in a very sick condition, in a very unhealthy state. I was very skinny. I was, like I said, very sick, and I had track marks all up and down my arms, so much so that the police officers in intake took pictures of my arms for my jacket or for my arrest report. There was no doubt in my mind that I was dehydrated upon my arrest, and I was probably dehydrated for a long time because I wasn't drinking enough fluids every single day. I didn't know it at the time that being 3 weeks pregnant and arrested was the biggest blessing I could have ever received. It got me off the street. It got me to a place where I was sober, and it saved my daughter's life. For weeks and even a couple of months, I was in complete denial that I was pregnant. I wasn't showing yet, and I couldn't wrap my head around being pregnant because I had to go to prison. I knew how to go to prison. I didn't know how to go to prison pregnant. And for weeks I acted like it wasn't a thing. At about 3 months, that's when Fort Smith, Arkansas, or Sebastian County Jail, finally gave me one prenatal vitamin. And the only reason they gave me that prenatal vitamin is because a nurse brought in her own and put them on the med cart specifically for me. If I was serving time in a New York County jail, I would have had a prenatal vitamin in intake. The minute they found out that I was pregnant, if I was in New York, I would have had a prenatal vitamin. In Arkansas, I had to beg and fight for them, and eventually a nurse brought in her own for me. Also, at about 3.5 months, I had my first doctor's visit in the street. Now, because a doctor was not coming into the jail, they had to take me to medical visits in the free world. This was the most humiliating, dehumanizing experience of my entire life. They would shackle my feet, shackle my hands, and shackle my stomach. And the shackle around my stomach would connect to the shackles on my hands, black boxed up, which means a black box is over where you could pick the cuffs so that I couldn't pick them. I would sit in a waiting room with free world people at a free world clinic, and they would call my name, and I would wobble into the doctor's office for my prenatal checkup. I really want to talk about the shame and the judgment that I had felt, because during this time my hormones are all out of whack. I am very newly sober. I was very insecure about my appearance. I was very hard on myself. I felt so much shame and guilt, and I felt that on my own. I didn't need the correctional officers also guilting me and shaming me and looking at me like, oh God, you know, can't go to a prenatal visit. Like, the correctional officers treated me like trash. And I don't say that lightly, and I don't say that for you to feel bad for me. I'm saying that to explain to you how I felt. There was only one correctional officer that talked to me like I was a human being. I was that pregnant inmate. I wasn't Jessica. I was that pregnant inmate, and that's something I never thought that I would go through. I had seen women come through pregnant in the past, but I never even gave it much thought. I never thought about what they might be going through. I never thought about how emotionally difficult that must be for them. It never even crossed my mind, because a lot of the times, if it's not happening to you, you don't really think about it, right? So it was kind of just far from my mind. I never thought I'd be that pregnant inmate, but I was. The further along my pregnancy got, the more shame and judgment I received. It was very obvious that I was pregnant at 6 months. I'm pretty small, so you could tell at 4 months, but at 6 months it was even more obvious. And it was very difficult to deal with that shame and that judgment, and I was so scared. I would see correctional officers leave inmates alone in their cells, having seizures, self-harm, attempting all different kinds of things. I saw an overdose, and all of these things were ignored for hours. Correctional officers in Sebastian County and Fort Smith, Arkansas would often leave women locked down in their cells so that they did not have to deal with them, while the men were always out. They were never locked down unless something very violent took place. Women were kept locked down. They only came in there 3 times a day to feed us food and then leave. So I already didn't feel like a human being treated like that. Often there was only time to shower or eat. As far as how the inmates treated me, I had people in this jail with me that didn't like me from the street, or people that had slept with my baby daddy. I hate saying that, but you know what I mean. People that I just didn't get along with. But then I also had people that had my back and was there for me and looked out for me. During this time, I wasn't really afraid for my own self. I was afraid for my child. There was one inmate that tripped me when I walked by because her and I had problems, and she didn't give a shit that I was pregnant. She had threatened me openly several times, and one day I had walked by herself or something and she put her foot out and she tripped me. Luckily, I was okay, the baby was okay, but I didn't know that right away. I did catch myself, but I didn't know. I didn't really land on my stomach, but I didn't know if I was okay. I couldn't just hear the baby's heartbeat. I couldn't just have an ultrasound. I couldn't go to the doctor if I felt something was wrong. Also, during this time, my blood pressure was very high because of all these issues. Now, I'm sure we've all heard the saying, her face ain't pregnant. That got said to me all the time because I had enemies, but I also had people that respected me and liked me and was there and had my back. So I really appreciated that during that time. As far as extra food that I would receive, at night I would receive a bologna sandwich that was always hard and very difficult to eat, and an orange and a little carton of milk. That was my extra food as a pregnant inmate. Now, eventually I got so sick of oranges, and I would almost have to force myself to eat the oranges because I wasn't getting much vitamin C. I was so grateful for an orange every day. But after a while, every day of eating an orange, it just started making me nauseous for some reason, and I had to force myself to eat that. I would have to hustle to get commissary so that I could feed my daughter more food. There was one day where a correctional officer that did not like me saw me trading food items on a tray. I was trying to get items to make a sandwich, I think it was, but you didn't just get bread, like 2 pieces of bread. Diabetics would get bread. So I remember trading some kind of food for the bread because I really just wanted to make a sandwich, I think it was. And I gave her, you know, my biscuits or cornbread or whatever it was because I wanted a sandwich. That correctional officer locked me down and told me, you know, I couldn't trade food. She doesn't give a shit that I'm pregnant, doesn't give a shit that I was craving a sandwich. You're not gonna trade food in my facility. And I tried really hard not to dwell on that. I tried really hard not to let her get to me, but that just made me crazy because my hormones are out of whack. Your girl just wants a freaking sandwich. And I was so frustrated because I'm pregnant and I had cravings. I would really crave a lot of salt things. Really wanted salty food, but I remember that day really wanting like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something. I didn't get soft bread. Diabetics got fresh bread. So I could have taken the bread from the bologna sandwiches that they would give me at night, but it was hard bread because they kept the sandwiches for 24 hours in the refrigerator before it got to me. Nah, it just wasn't good. So I didn't get a lot of extra food. I could barely get vitamins. You know, that took me 3 months. I slept on the same 2-inch mat that everyone else slept on. I didn't get an extra pillow, didn't get an extra mat, didn't get anything extra. I didn't even get an extra uniform, you know? As my pregnancy progressed and I eventually ended up in prison, I would go to the infirmary once a week with the other pregnant women. There were about 5 at the time that I arrived. We would all go to the prison medical wing, you know, once a week after we got to 30 weeks pregnant, and we would have our doctor appointments together. The shame and the judgment never ended, never. Correctional officers always gave me that look, you know, that, God, like that she's the pregnant inmate look. And I just got used to it. I just got used to that, you know. It was very difficult for me. I never had a correctional officer be kind to me at all. The other women would want to talk about what the baby's name is going to be, or if the baby's going to family, and they asked me a lot of questions. A lot of the times I just didn't want to answer that because my family was in New York, 1,300 miles away. My daughter and I were in Arkansas. Now, I don't come from a wealthy family. So in order for my family to get custody of my daughter, they would have to, and I've gotten a lot of judgment for saying this online as well, but they would have to come to Arkansas. That takes time and money. They would have to fight a DHS case for me and have a home visit. New York and Arkansas would have to agree. It would take months. And a lot of people said, well, I don't care how much it costs. I would get my granddaughter. I understand that, but if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. And I don't come from a family that has money like that to spend thousands and thousands of dollars staying in Arkansas, and it just doesn't happen. Not only did my family not have the money to do that, but they also didn't have the space for a newborn baby or the means to take care of a newborn baby. This was also on me. This was me. I had to fix this. I had to do it on my own, and I had to be the one that got my daughter out of DHS custody. After my daughter was born, I did not see her again until she was 6 months old. During that time, it took me about 90 days to get the first picture of my daughter, and that was because the foster parents didn't know the rules of the prison. They tried to send me probably 20, 30 pictures of my daughter. The prison policy was 5 only, so the first picture that I got of my daughter was a black and white printout picture from a computer, and it was very hard to see her picture because she was so beautiful, and all of the other inmates had visits every single week with their families and their babies. I was the only person that at the time that their daughter went to DHS custody when everyone else's child went to family because they lived in Arkansas and it was just easier for them. I became very bitter and very resentful that other women got to see their children and I didn't. When my daughter turned 6 months old, I got to go to court, family court. I was transported back to the county that I committed the crime in, and the judge that was overseeing my case allowed me to have 15 minutes with my daughter in chambers. I was in an orange uniform with shackles around my feet, but the correctional officer took them off my hands so I could hold my daughter for the first time. She was so big and she had these cute little pigtails. The foster parents were so kind and so sweet, and I immediately loved them and trusted them with my little girl. We still talk to this day. But the foster father had his arms crossed. He was kind of sizing me up. Ironically, he's a police officer. So it was just that moment, that inmate cop moment where he didn't trust me and I didn't really trust him. And that took time. He definitely, not to my face, but doubted my ability to get out and have my daughter. And I knew that, I could see that. He definitely never said that to me, but it was something that I could read instantly. You know, I was a criminal. I had been through the system many times. I know what that cop is thinking. I automatically knew he was a cop, even though he wasn't dressed like a cop. it was just a weird thing that people that have been through the system can tell. I can tell by how you're standing, how you're looking at me. What I could just tell by your body language. I went back to prison after spending 15 minutes with my daughter, and it hurt. It hurt so bad seeing her, but it once again lit that flame. You know, it lit that fire inside of me to get her back. I kept that pain inside of me for so long, and I just used it as fuel. I used it as motivation. The way that the correctional officers would kind of look at me and sneer or make little sideline comments or ask if I got pregnant by an officer. I did not. It would all just sit there, and I just used all of that negative energy as fuel. Some people are motivated by positive encouragement. I'm motivated when you tell me I can't do something. Please tell me that this is impossible, because I'm gonna show you that it's not and that I can be the one that does it. Please tell me that I am not shit and I'll never do this, or you can't do that, because that's what I need to go chase whatever it is that I want. And let me tell y'all right now, I wanted to be the mother to my child more than I've ever wanted anything in my life. I was not going to leave my daughter in the system, and I would do anything to get her. Anything. I don't care how many jobs I had to work, how long it took. I would fight to regain custody of my daughter by any and all means necessary, except for selling drugs. I had to do it the right way. I had to do what they asked, and I fought every day for a year after I got out to regain custody of my daughter. Now, that process was very daunting as well. They wanted me to do hair follicle testing like every other month. They wanted me to do counseling, NA meetings. I had to work 2 jobs, get an apartment, get a car, get clothes for my daughter. I had to have a psychological evaluation done, a child abuse testing evaluation done. I was under a microscope. There were so many guidelines and so many things that I had to accomplish in such a short amount of time that it felt so overwhelming. I had to have a driver's license. I had to have New York drop warrants on a case that I was completely innocent of. Eventually they did, but that was just weighing over me. And at every turn, a piece of me wanted to give up because I was tired and because I was doubting myself, and I thought, she's with such a good family. Maybe I'm not meant to be in her life. That self-doubt did not leave me. As on fire as I was to get my daughter back, there was always that little side of me that's like, are you really meant to be her mom? Are you really good enough to be your mom? Do you really deserve it? After everything you've done, do you really deserve to be that little girl's mother? Why would a judge pick you? You're a drug dealer, you're a criminal, you're a convict. Your record is crazy. Why would they pick you? I eventually had to stop telling myself what could go wrong, and I had to start telling myself all the things that could go right. What if I am worthy to be her mother? What if I'm good enough? What if she belongs with me? What if I can really do this? After a year of fighting a DHS case, I walked into court with my daughter, who was now living with me on a temporary basis, almost like a probationary period. I was holding her little hand. She's 2 years old, chubby and cute and beautiful, and she was in a little button-up shirt. I'll never forget what she was wearing because we dressed up for court that day, and I tried to make the morning fun. And a 2-year-old isn't going to understand the severity of why it is you're going to court. They don't understand. You know, she had this little bag of goldfish crackers and her cute little button-up shirt, and she just looked so precious. And we're outside waiting to be called, and we're playing with these little goldfish crackers, like swimming, you know, and I was just enjoying that time with her because I didn't know if it was going to be the last moment that we had together, and I wanted that morning to be fun. They finally called my name, and I walked in and I sat Micah down next to me, and I had to stand up in front of the judge, and she's just not even saying anything. She just is looking over all these papers. She's looking over my car title. I got a really cheap Scion XB. It's like one of those little toaster box cars. Not the hamster car. That's different. And I had a really crappy duplex, and I was working as a freight broker at this time. I got one consistent job. The caseworker really made it clear they didn't want me working 2 jobs. They wanted me to have one steady, reliable income. I was able to find that. And they're looking over all of this stuff. My child abuse testing scores, which I never saw. My psychological report, I don't know what she is reading at this point. And I was very I was very nervous. She's going over all of these papers and I'm so nervous. I'm looking over to the caseworkers. I'm shaking, my heart is pounding out of my chest. I look over at my little girl and she's just so sweet. And Micah has always been the best behaved child on planet Earth. She's so good, and she'll just sit there and she'll listen. She gets bored pretty quick, but she's so well behaved, and I was just so proud of her sitting there quietly and patiently, which is very difficult for a 2-year-old to do, but Micah's always been so well behaved. I thought all kids were like that. Then we had Riley. They're not, as it turns out. Anyway, after what felt like forever, that judge said, "Miss Kent." And I just knew, like, this is the moment. Like, this is the moment. Here we go. Took a deep breath and I closed my eyes for a second, and she said, "I'm really impressed. It's rare to see someone work this hard to regain custody of their child. Unless anyone objects, I find no reason to grant you sole legal custody of Micah. Good luck to you." I grabbed Micah and I hugged her and I said to her, "We did it." And I cried. I mean, I am like a ball bag. And I walk out of the courtroom as quickly as I can. The attorney representing me shook my hand. I was just completely shocked. Like, I get to be her mom. I get to be this child's mom. I won custody of my daughter. Are you sure? Like, am I dreaming? Because this is the moment that I dreamed about ever since she was born. And now 2 years later, I get to be her mom. I was overjoyed. I was terrified. I had no idea how to be a mom. I could barely make spaghetti. And it was just such an overload of emotions. We drove home that day, and I kept looking at her in the rearview mirror, playing with some toys in her car seat, and I just could not believe that she is my forever. Like, I get to be in her life forever. There was nothing greater than that moment. And yes, being a mom comes with so many challenges, but I am so grateful that I not only have Micah, but we were able to give her a sister. So we have 2 daughters, and life is so good. It definitely has challenges. I don't want you guys to think that parenting is perfect and simple, and I just love every moment of being a mom, because it is hard, but it's the best job. It's the most exhausting, the most challenging, but the most rewarding and the most beautiful job I've ever had in my life is getting to be those girls' mom, and I'm so grateful. I'm gonna end today's video here. I really hope this gave you guys some insight on how women are treated pregnant in prison. And a lot of them don't even get taken to the hospital. A lot of them are left alone to give birth in dirty jail cells. I am very lucky that my story didn't go that way and they eventually took me to the hospital, because that doesn't always happen. I am also very blessed that I was able to get my daughter out of the system, because that is such a challenging and difficult thing. We need to spend more time supporting parents that have made a mistake but are otherwise good parents. We need more good foster parents. We need the system to help with reunification, because that is and should always be the goal of foster care. I'm very grateful that my experience was positive. Was it difficult? Hell yeah. But this story has a happy ending. It doesn't escape me that so many others do not regain custody of their children. It doesn't escape me that other women have been left alone to give birth in jail cells. And hopefully this channel will start the conversation of change. I love you guys. Stay safe, stay sober, do not break the law, and I'll see you in my next one.